He finally reached the right place. The vows welcomes him. Arthur, who is confused, says hello to the giant mountain, and the vows says that it would be interesting, but she was not that bunch of rocks. As Arthur enters the cave, he falls and meets his savior. She was intimidating. She was a peakus. She starts to get close to him. Arthur can't help to be scared, and he starts to get back, but she really wanted to heal him. Then she says that she would create a dimensional portal strong enough to send him home. It would take a long time, but meanwhile he could eat from the plants and spices she had inside. Her appearance was horrific, but the truth is that she was kind. Arthur asks her name. Her name is Sylvia, and now he can't stop asking her questions, which she answers gladly, as she says they were in a little zone between the clearing of beasts and the forest. Nobody knows that zone because she has been protecting it. Why is she alone? She was alone because she didn't have anyone to be with. She had many enemies looking for her, and in her last fight they injured her pretty bad while she was escaping. And lastly, she answers why she saved him. To be honest, she didn't even know. Maybe because she was moved by his sacrifice and bravery, or simply because she felt alone. Now she retires and goes to heal her wounds so she could start working on the portal tomorrow. But before she goes, she told him that his family and friends were safe. He shouldn't be worried. With time, their relationship grew stronger. When Sylvia wasn't working on the portal, they would eat, played, or they just talked. Maybe she looked like the devil himself, but she was kind and gentle. But she also reprimanded him when he was wrong, just like a mother does. Like this one time, when Arthur showed his hate for those bandits and how much he wanted to kill them. Sylvia hit him as she says that he is right. They deserve to die, but he should not let hatred and vengeance thoughts dominate his mind, because it will ruin his life. The hours became days, and the days became weeks. Sylvia's one seemed to be getting worse with time, but she tells him not to worry, that it was normal, that normally her wound would get infected, but nothing to be worried about. She was wondering about his cure because normally humans grow theirs at 12 or 13, so why? A proud Arthur says that he is a genius, and then Sylvia says that maybe he could learn from this. It was about absorbing mana while moving, even if he is very good at fighting. Arthur can't understand how he is able to do that, and Sylvia explains that humans' way of thinking is very flat when it comes to mana, and it is something very basic for beasts. They learn it naturally, but because humans take too long to awake it, they can't manage to comprehend it well. But this is not Arthur's case, and he maybe could do it. So excited. He now starts to practice, but it is more difficult than he thought. But with time he finally manages to do it. The problem is that when he goes to tell Sylvia, she is on the ground in a puddle of blood. Arthur immediately runs to help her. He couldn't understand why her wound gotten worse. So he looks at the portal and sees that is finished, and then he understood. She was sacrificing herself to create the portal. Sylvia tells him to calm down, not to cry anymore. They had little time together left, and there was no point in wasting the time blaming himself. But Arthur says how not to. She was dying just to help him. She says that in fact he is doing her a favor. Now she could leave that cave faster, and Sylvia shows her real form. She was a dragon. Arthur was speechless. And even though he had a lot of questions, there was no time. Sylvia had to use her real form to complete the portal. But now that she had showed her form, they would come for her. Arthur couldn't understand anything, but she gets out what it seems to be an egg and gives it to him along with a feather that should hide his aura. Then she touches his chest, and some marks appears in his hands. Sylvia says that with this, everything will be revealed at the right moment. The portal was ready. She didn't have the time to make it directly to his home, but he should be able to arrive to a place with humans nearby. Suddenly debris starts to fall, and a dark voice is heard. Someone had appeared to take Sylvia. It was another Pika. Then Sylvia casted a spell that seemed to stop time. She apologizes to Arthur because the truth is that she prolonged the time when making the portal just to spend more time with him, and as a last favor, she asked him to call her grandma, and between tears he says to forget that she must take advantage since the time was stopped to escape from there. He didn't care about the past, but Sylvia says that she can't do that and pushes him to the portal, and while getting away and seeing Sylvia getting far from him, Arthur calls her grandma, and she is happy and thanks him for everything. Arthur appears in an unknown place. He was on the floor and is not motivated to getting up. His mind was melancholic about those for months he lived with her, but something gets him up. It was her vows. She survived. But not really. It was only a message left by her. It was a bit frustrating, but Sylvia says that he is not ready for the truth. His body was a child S1, and even with his core being dark red, he wasn't strong enough. Before dying, Sylvia left him a gift, her special will, and says that his future development as magician will be up to how good he uses her gift. Even though Arthur didn't care, he wanted her to be alive. Sylvia could see how Arthur might be feeling pain, anger, guilt, but she reminds him that he has a family to take care of and a purpose to fulfill. The only thing she asks is that he becomes a man that her and his parents could be proud of. And lastly, she says that he will receive more news when his core has passed the white phase. In that moment she will explain everything, but the most shocking thing is when she says goodbye, calling him King Grey. Now Arthur is filled with questions, since when she knew about his identity, how did she knew? But it was useless. He wouldn't get any answers. He rather gets up and start exploring the forest to know where he is. He climbs up to the top of a tree and realizes that he was inside Elshire Forest. Sylvia told him that she would send him to a place near humans, so he didn't understand why he was there, and suddenly he hears a scream. Arthur rushes. It must be humans, and from the top he manages to see their carriage. What a luck! Maybe he could be friends with them, but when he gets near, something disturbs him. So he listens closely and his suspicions are confirmed. They were slave traders. They were happy because they caught a female elf. Female elves worth a lot in the market. Especially this one, because she was a kid and she probably was a virgin. Arthur was very angry, but looking at the bright side, it was an opportunity for him to de-stress a bit. Arthur wanted to kill them so bad, but he didn't act immediately. Even for him, facing the four of them would be difficult, so he followed them, waiting for an opportunity, eating energy to then make a move. The night had come, and it was now or never. Arthur took some kind of seed and threw it to distract the wolves. The wolves start to behave like crazy, and just as he wanted, one of the kidnappers gets out to try and calm them. Arthur didn't have any weapons, so he had to use a method from his old world. He didn't know if it would work, but luckily it did. He created a magic knife using just his mana. Quietly, he went down from the tree, and before the guy could talk, he murdered him, grabs him before he hits the floor to avoid noses, and thanks him for the weapon. Now the wolves are taking care of the body. The guy took a lot of time to return, so one of the other kidnappers goes out to see what happened. When he sees that scene, he can't help being in shock. But Arthur appears before he could say anything. Fighting with that body was exhausting, but he must finish with the others while they were sleeping. But the elf brings down his plan when she starts screaming for help. The other two guys left wakes up and they start looking for their friends. One of the see Arthur and rushes into him, but Arthur was more powerful, so he left him out of combat easily. The guy screams out of pain, alerting the last of them. The guy warns him, saying that the boy was a magician, but instead of being scared, the bastard gets happy. A magician boy is very rare, and he might get more money with him than the girl, so he shows him that he is also a magician and please avoid being hurt. In a blink of an eye he gets behind Arthur, but he dodges him. The guy rushes again, but Arthur breaks his hips with a rock. He also threw the knife, but the bastard grabbed it like it was nothing. He was fast. Our protagonist manages to defend himself, but he still hit him with a kick, and the guys grabbed it. He just grabbed his gold mine, but Arthur came up with something in mind to condense his mana and create a sword. It was pretty similar to wind magic. Maybe fire magic could be condensed as well, so he tries and manages to create a strong explosion. Now the guy was really furious. He didn't care about selling him. He was going to kill him, but before he could start talking, Arthur beats the shit out of him. The last bastard begs him for forgiveness, but Arthur has no mercy for people like them. It was difficult, but he finally did it. Now he goes to the child and with a smile in his face he frees her, even though he carries her blindfolded all the way. He didn't want a child to see all that terrible scene. After a long walk they reach a safe place and Arthur removes her blindfold. The girl is moved, and she thanks him for everything. Arthur says that he needs to get back home, and that the bad guys wouldn't chase her anymore. It is supposed that elves are safe in that forest, but the girl says that that's not the case, that beasts always scare them. Arthur gives up, and he ends up agreeing to accompany the girl, and he didn't even know where she lived. Arthur leaves her alone for a moment while he is searching for supply for their journey. He gets back to the bandits' carriage and takes everything that might be useful. He doesn't know how much they will be traveling, so the more he carries the better. The carriage was ruined, so they couldn't use it, and mounting the wolves wasn't a viable option, so he frees them. Arthur found some clothes for the girl and he gives it to her, and together they start walking the direction she marked. They got to know each other more while walking. Her name was Tesha Irilith, a smiling, curious, kind, but above all a crybaby girl. During all night Arthur tells her to go to sleep while he keeps watching. But he really wanted a minute alone to find out the whole thing Sylvia talked about, but the child wanted him to sleep with her. She said that she would never share bed with a boy, but she promises not to say anything. Arthur tells her not to worry, that he was okay, but she insists that the beasts would be attracted by a kid alone. She says that it was for his own safety, but the truth is that she was scared. And now that he was there, she could finally get some rest. They went their way for a few days, and even though going back to his family was something that worried him, what bothered Arthur the most during his journey were the strong and sudden pains going through his monocore. But he tried to hide them from Tesha so she wouldn't worry. They would sleep together, walk together, hunt together, even though she didn't want to. But little by little the elf seemed to know more and more the place. They were near, but their journey kept being delayed because his body couldn't hold up the constant rhythm. Tesha mustered the courage and finally asked Arthur that after all they've been through, now she could call her art as his family did. Arthur says yes, that there was no problem. But she was disappointed because he accepted just like that, as if it was nothing. So just to bother her, Arthur changes his answer and says that it would be an honor if Tesha Irilith would call this humble peasant as art. Although their mental age different, both of them had become close, and at last, after a long travel they arrived. Arthur could only see trees and bushes and a lot of tall grass, but Tesha starts touching some trees and a magic entrance appears. They entered the portal and suddenly they arrived at this incredible place. A bunch of kneeled men appear immediately. They had come to welcome the princess. Arthur couldn't believe what he heard, but the king and queen Eleanor appear. And they were so relieved because their daughter had finally appeared. And with them there was Virion Irilith. A man presents in every history book, the old king of Eleanor who led the last war against humans from Sapin Kingdom. Arthur gives a little push to Tesha and gets happy for this touching reunion. The king thanks him for helping them, and he invites him to a feast as a sign of gratitude. His words were kind, but his eyes showed that it was an order and not an offer. Arthur accepts, and everyone gets surprised when Tesha holds his hand and with a big smile, she says that she has so many things to show him. When he knew that she was a princess, he thought that she'd live in a big castle, but the truth was so much more than he thought. The queen asks her servants to make their guest comfortable, but Arthur refuses. First of all, he wanted to explain what happened so they could take it seriously and not just like a child. He politely introduces himself and then he proceeds to explain everything. Even though he doesn't tell all the truth, he wouldn't tell them that a dragon took him there. He says that he was with his family, and they had to go separated because of some bandits. The king got furious when he knows that some slave traders were guilty of all that. It was about some miserable humans. I should have known, he says, but Arthur says that trafficking is a way of life, not a whole race. The soldiers get their weapons ready, but the old king stops them, and now he asks, how is it possible that a kid could rescue her? Did he negotiate with them? Did he ask for mercy? Butte Arthur says no. Even though he is just a kid, he also is a magician. So he got rid of them and rescued her. One of the soldiers gets angry for hearing those lies, but the old king puts him in his place with just a stare. Arthur says that he doesn't care if they believe him or not. The princess was safe and sound, and now the only thing he wanted is to go back to his family. Tesha didn't want him to go, but Arthur explains that because of the history between their kingdoms, a human should not stay for long, and his priority was to know if his family was okay. The king says that it doesn't matter what happened in the past. The truth is that he rescued her daughter and he even bothered to get her there, so he deserved a reward. But unfortunately, a portal that leads to the human kingdom can be used once every 7 years during the 3 races summit, and it was still 5 years out until reopens. Yet they had no trouble sending a group of guards to escort him home safe and sound. He would have his escort ready for tomorrow, so for now he asks him to get comfortable and rest. So Arthur goes and take a pleasant shower. But everything goes wrong again when those pains got back. Tessa also appears in his room and she greets him with a header. He had treated her family so coldly and also, he was leaving so soon, she didn't want him to go. He is her first friend, and she was about to cry but Arthur cheers her up and asks her to show him the castle. Tessa takes him to her favorite place. It was beautiful. But suddenly a knife is thrown to the princess. Arthur catches it in the air, realized where the attack came from and uses the knife against him. It was Tessa's grandfather. Arthur asks why the hell did he want to kill his own granddaughter, but later he realizes that it was a fake knife, he was only testing him. His use of mana was mediocre, but he had good senses and reflexes. Now the grandfather could see how he managed to defeat those slave traders. Tessa asks her grandpa not to bother him, but Mr. Virium says that it's been a long time since he knew someone interesting. So he gave the boy a wooden sword and asked him to show him what he has got. Arthur immediately swung his sword into his neck, but he just managed to hit a residual image. Even with that, this little boy was frightening. Arthur rushes again, but he manages to strike another residual image. The grandpa gets behind him and hit him on the back. Arthur manages to protect himself and gets out just in time to avoid another attack. He is hit in the air with a poke. Art goes flying, but he grabs his sword again, and he uses fire magic again. Say get close, but Virium takes his sword out again. It was his chance. The old man attacks and Arthur takes advantage to get over him. Then he twists amazingly in the air, and though the attack he manages to hit him, the grandpa couldn't believe that he actually hit him. That happened for being arrogant. He wanted a second round, but Tessa says that he already intimidated him enough. She also says that he should be a little softer. But the old man says that if otherwise, the intimidated one would have been him. Arthur feels flattered by his thoughts, and now the grandpa asks him to become his disciple. Arthur is shocked by that petition, but he says that it could not be possible. Can't a human live in the elf kingdom? Verinium says that while under his arm, nobody would dare to kick him out. He should be aware that he was better than many other kids, even adults, but he need to understand that he could teach him things that not even the best human magicians could. Even with that, Arthur refuses. The only thing he wanted was to be reunited with his family and let them know that he was fine. But then Virium proposes something. If there was a way to communicate with them and make them know that he was okay, would he accept? Arthur didn't get the chance to answer when the grandpa sends his granddaughter to sleep, and he confesses that he felt something during their combat. He asks him if his mana core has been in pain, pains that grow stronger and frequently. Arthur could explain himself how he knew this. The old man says that it is more important the fact that he wasn't aware about why he had those pains. The grandpa explains that what a beastful is. Beasts are classified by their strength, and class of beasts or superior get the ability to transmit their will, whether to his descendants or someone born to them. He wouldn't ask him how he got that powerful will, but at that point what he got inside was hurting him. The reason why Virium knew all this is because he also had a will, and that's what it's called, a beast tamer, a title obtained when you finally conquer the beast within you. He knew that to be reunited with his family was important, but it was paramount to learn how to control his power. Otherwise it would end up destroying him from the inside. The next day he is woken up early by Tessa, who was very excited because his grandfather